Episode 1, The Return. The sky above Ashfall was a dull gray, thick with the remnants of storm that had passed through hours earlier, leaving the small, secluded town in an eerie silence. The streets were empty, and the usually bustling air seemed strangely still. The scent of rain lingered in the air, but there was something else, something more pungent, a hint of decay, like the town itself was slowly rotting away. Maya stood at the edge of the old bridge, looking down at the murky waters of the Ash River below. She hadn't been here in nearly 10 years, not since she had left after her parents' sudden disappearance. But today, she returned. The pull to come back had been irresistible, like an invisible thread tugging her toward Ashfall. She couldn't explain why, but it felt like something she needed to do, something that couldn't be ignored any longer. She stepped off the bridge, her boots crunching against the gravel road as she walked toward the heart of the town. The houses on either side of her were aged. They were gray and peeling, their windows shattered or covered in dust. There was no one in sight, no children playing on the sidewalks, no dogs barking in the distance. The town had been swallowed by a kind of quiet that felt unnatural. As Maya walked further into Ashfall, a strange sensation began to creep over her. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up, an overwhelming feeling of being watched pressed down on her chest. She had come back to find answers, to understand what happened to her parents all those years ago. But now that she was here, she wasn't sure she was ready to face whatever lay buried in this cursed town. Her family's house, once warm and full of laughter, stood in front of her, the front gate crooked and rusted, the garden overgrown with weeds. Maya hesitated for a moment, the weight of memories crashing over her. This was where it all began, where her parents had disappeared without a trace, leaving nothing behind but unanswered questions and a broken heart. She pushed open a creaky gate, the sound of metal scraping against metal sharp and unsettling in the heavy silence. The door to the house was slightly ajar, as if someone had been expecting her, or perhaps someone or something had been waiting for her to return. Her hand trembled as she reached the doorknob, the cold brass chilling her fingertips. "Hello?" Maya's voice broke the silence as she stepped inside, but no one answered. The air inside was thick with dust, and the faint scent of old wood and decay clung to the walls. Everything was the same as she remembered it. The worn leather armchair by the fireplace, the photos of her family on the walls, the faint trace of her mother's perfume lingering in the air. But there was something else too, something new and unsettling. It was as if the house itself had been waiting, holding its breath for her arrival. As she moved deeper into the house, she heard it, a soft, faint whisper. She stopped, listening intently. The voice seemed to be coming from upstairs, drifting down the narrow hallway like a breeze. Maya's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't alone. The voice, soft, distant, and barely audible, seemed to beckon her, urging her forward. It wasn't like a normal voice. It was as if it had come from the walls themselves, from the very fabric of the house. It was a voice that belonged to someone or something that had been here long before her return. "Who's there?" Maya called out, her voice steady but tinged with unease. The whisper grew louder, more insistent. She followed it up the stairs, each step creaking under her weight as she ascended into the darkened hallway. The shadows in the house seemed to grow deeper, as if the light itself was being swallowed by the darkness. The house seemed alive, as if it were watching her every move. At the end of the hall stood a door, slightly ajar. The whisper was louder now, almost like a soft chant, and Maya felt a chill run through her as she approached. She didn't know what she was expecting, but she knew she had to open the door. It felt like she had no choice. With a trembling hand, she pushed the door open. Inside, the room was empty, except for a single object resting on the floor. A book. The pages were yellowed with age, and the cover was faded, but the symbol on the front was unmistakable. It was the same symbol that had appeared in her dreams, the symbol that had haunted her for years, the symbol of the Forsaken One. Maya's breath caught in her throat. She had seen this symbol before, in the drawings her mother had left behind, in the stories her father had whispered to her at night. It was a mark of something ancient, something powerful and terrifying, and it was tied to her family, to her parents' disappearance. She knelt down and picked up the book, her fingers brushing against the cover. The moment she touched it, A jolt of electricity ran through her, as if the book itself had come alive. Her vision blurred for a split second, and she gasped, almost dropping the book. When she looked again, the room around her had changed. The walls were no longer cracked and decaying. Instead, they were covered in strange, glowing symbols that pulsed with otherworldly energy. The air was thick with the scent of something ancient and forgotten, and the floor beneath her seemed to shift, as if the very foundation of the house was being torn apart. Maya's head swam, and she stumbled backward, barely managing to keep her balance. She shook her head, trying to clear the disorienting vision, but the symbols on the walls didn't disappear. They were real, more real than anything she had ever seen. And then she heard it again, the whisper. This time, it was louder, closer, as though it was coming from right beside her. She turned, but no one was there. The whispering voice grew louder still. "You shouldn't have come back, Maya." The chill in the air intensified as the voice grew sharper, more insistent. It was no longer a whisper, but a command. "You have opened the door, and now there is no turning back." Maya's blood ran cold. Episode 2, Whispers in the Forest. The sun had barely risen, casting long shadows over Ashfall, but the town still seemed caught in a haze, as if the night's chill had not yet loosened its grip on the streets. Maya stood at the edge of the forest, where the tall trees loomed like silent sentinels, their twisted branches stretching into the sky. The whispers from the house still echoed in her mind, lingering in the back of her thoughts, reminding her that something was terribly wrong. She had barely slept. The book, the symbols, the strange visions, everything was too much to process. She'd spent hours staring at the pages of the book, but nothing made sense. The symbols were unrecognizable, ancient, almost alive in their own way. It was as if the book itself was a gateway, a doorway into something far darker than she could comprehend. But it was the whisper that drove her to the forest. "You shouldn't have come back, Maya." The voice had called to her through the silence of the night, its warning echoing through the house like a threat. It wasn't just a voice. It was a presence, a dark energy that seemed to seep into her thoughts, urging her to leave, to never return. But Maya couldn't leave. Not yet. She needed answers, and the forest was the key. The forest had always been a part of Ashfall. Its towering trees, the thick underbrush, the winding paths. It was a place that carried both mystery and danger, a place where the town's history seemed to fade into the darkness. No one in Ashfall went into the forest alone, especially at night. But Maya wasn't like the rest of the town. She wasn't just returned to Ashfall to lay old ghosts to rest. She had come back to uncover the truth. As she stepped into the forest, the air grew thick, heavy with the scent of damp earth and decay. The sounds of birds and rustling leaves faded, replaced by an unsettling silence that seemed to echo in her bones. Every step she took felt like it echoed across the void of time itself. The deeper she went, the more it felt like the trees were closing in on her, like the forest was alive, watching, waiting. She continued walking, the crunch of leaves beneath her boots the only sound in the oppressive quiet. Her thoughts were muddled. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being pulled deeper into something she couldn't escape, like a thread that was slowly unraveling around her. It wasn't just a voice. It was something else, something darker. She could feel it pressing in on her from all sides, a presence that hung in the air like a suffocating fog. The path seemed to go on forever, the trees forming a canopy that blocked out the sunlight, casting the forest floor into an eerie twilight. As Maya walked, she felt the faintest tug on her senses, a whisper at the edge of her hearing. So soft she wasn't sure if it was real or just her imagination. But then it came again. "Maya." The voice was faint, distant, but unmistakable. It was calling to her, beckoning her forward. She stopped, listening, her heart pounding in her chest. The forest around her seemed to hold its breath, the trees standing still as if waiting for something to happen. "Maya, come closer." The whispering grew louder, more insistent, drawing her toward the center of the forest, where the trees parted to reveal a clearing. In the center of the clearing stood an old stone altar, covered in vines and moss, its surface worn and chipped by time. The altar was surrounded by a circle of stones, their surfaces etched with symbols that Maya didn't recognize. It was like nothing she had ever seen, but it felt familiar. She took a hesitant step forward, her breath caught in her throat. There was something about this place, something that felt ancient and alive. The air was thick with a strange energy, and as she approached the altar, she felt the ground beneath her feet shift, as though the very earth was awakening. She could hear the faint whispering again, coming from the stones themselves. The Forsaken One will rise. Maya's heart stopped. The voice, the same voice that had echoed through the house, was coming from the stones. The words chilled her to the bone. The Forsaken One. She had heard that name before in her parents' journals, in the stories her father used to tell her as a child. But she had always thought they were just that, stories. Now, standing in the clearing, Maya realized the stories were more than just tales. They were warnings. Warnings about something dark, something ancient, that was waiting to be unleashed. You cannot stop it, the voice whispered again, its tone almost mocking, as if it knew something Maya didn't. You opened the door. Now you must face the consequences. Maya took another step forward, her hands trembling as she reached out toward the altar. The symbols on the stone seemed to shift and glow, casting an eerie light across the clearing. Her fingers brushed against the stone, and the moment she touched it, the world around her seemed to shift. The ground beneath her feet cracked, and a deep rumble echoed through the forest. The trees began to sway, their branches creaking and groaning like they were alive. The sky above darkened, and the whispers grew louder, now more like a chorus of voices, rising in a crescendo of panic and fury. Maya stumbled back, her breath coming in short gasps. The altar glowed brighter now, its symbols flaring with an unnatural light. She could feel the rift, the tear in reality, expanding, pulling the very fabric of the world apart. And then something stepped through. It wasn't a figure, at least not in the way she understood. It was like a shadow, an absence of light, a form that flickered and shifted, as if it couldn't decide what it wanted to be. But there was no mistaking it. It was here in the clearing, and it was coming for her. She froze, her heart hammering in her chest. The whispers grew louder, more chaotic, as the figure slowly advanced toward her, its presence pressing in on her like a storm. It wasn't speaking to her, but she could feel its words, its thoughts, inside her mind. You have awoken me. The figure's voice was not a voice at all, but a thought, a presence that filled her head with darkness. Now you will pay the price. Episode 3. The Hidden Shrine. Maya stood at the edge of the forest clearing, her pulse thudding in her ears like a war drum. The figure, whatever it was, had stepped through the rift. The air around her felt thick, as if reality itself was bending under the weight of its presence. The trees behind her groaned under the pressure, their branches stretching toward her like the fingers of some ancient creature. She didn't dare turn around. She could hear it, its whispering voice growing louder and more insistent, not from her ears, but from deep inside her skull. You have awakened me, Maya. The voice was sharp, like 1,000 jagged pieces of glass scraping together. Now you will understand the price of your curiosity. The shadows in the clearing shifted, as though they were reaching toward her, their tendrils curling around her legs, her waist, like invisible chains pulling her into the darkness. She wanted to scream, to run, but her legs were frozen in place. The figure's form, an absence of light, a shadow that flickered like the final breaths of a dying star, loomed closer. Her breath came in shallow gasps, her hands shaking as she reached for the amulet around her neck, the one her mother had given her years ago. She had worn it for as long as she could remember, its smooth surface now cold against her skin. It was the only thing that felt solid, that tethered her to something real, something safe. And then she remembered. Her parents. They had warned her, hadn't they? The strange symbols, the book she'd found tucked away in the attic, the stories they'd told her when she was young, the Forsaken One. Her parents had known. They had always known this day would come. Maya, the voice was a whisper, but it was louder now, as if it were right behind her. Maya spun around, her heart at her throat, and there it was, the shadow, the presence that had haunted her since she returned to Ashfall. It wasn't just in her mind. It was real. The ground beneath her feet trembled, and a low hum vibrated through the air. It was coming from the direction of the forest. Deeper, further than the clearing. Maya's eyes widened as she realized what it was. The shrine. The place her parents had warned her about. The place she had felt before, but had never seen. The place that had been hidden away. Sealed by her family's bloodline to keep the darkness at bay. Without thinking, she turned toward the trees. She had to find it. The shrine. There was something in that place. Something that could stop this. It had to be the key. Her legs moved on their own accord, the instinct to flee mingling with the desperate need for answers. The forest was alive, the air thick with the presence of something ancient and hungry. Maya pushed through the underbrush, her breath ragged, her heart hammering in her chest. Every step felt like she was sinking deeper into a nightmare. Every shadow pressing closer, the very trees closing in on her as though they were trying to keep her from the truth. You could not escape, Maya. The voice rang out in her mind again, its power pulling her toward it. But she kept running. Faster now, the trees parting as she neared a small hill. She could feel it, the pull of something waiting for her. The forest was guiding her, and for a split second, she wondered if it had always been waiting for her to return. Had she been drawn back here for a reason? Had she been destined to unlock whatever had been hidden all these years? She didn't know, but she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't stop now. As she crested the hill, she saw it, the shrine. It was nestled in a small hollow, overgrown with ivy and moss. The stone structure was ancient, covered in symbols that seemed to pulse with a faint glow, like they were alive. The air around the shrine hummed with energy, and Maya could feel it now, deep in her bones. The power here was old, older than Ashfall itself, older than the town's forgotten history. Maya stepped forward, her hand outstretched toward the stone. The moment her fingers brushed against the surface, the world around her seemed to shift. The ground beneath her feet rumbled, and the air thickened, heavy with an oppressive force. Maya staggered back, her heart racing, as the symbols on the shrine flared with light. The shadows in the forest seemed to come alive, swirling around her in a chaotic dance. Maya, the voice came again, sharper, more commanding now, and she knew in that moment that it wasn't just a voice. It was a presence, a force that had been waiting for this moment, waiting for her to awaken it. Maya's mind spun, but she couldn't turn away. She had to understand. She had to know what her family had kept from her. She reached for the book that had been left in her parents' house, clutching it to her chest. As she flipped through its pages, her fingers found the old, faded drawings that her father had made, drawings of the shrine, of the symbols, of the figure that lay beyond. Her breath caught in her throat. There, on the final page, was a drawing of the Forsaken One. It was a figure cloaked in darkness, its eyes two empty voids, staring directly at her, as though it knew she would come. And beneath the image were the words, "The Forsaken One awakens with the blood of the chosen. It is only through sacrifice that the curse may be broken. The gate will open and the darkness will consume the living unless the last descendant is willing to pay the price." The words burned into her mind as the shrine began to hum louder, vibrating with energy. Maya could feel the power in her veins now, the connection to the curse, to the forsaken force that had been trapped for centuries. It was calling her, pulling her in. "You are the last. You are the key." The words twisted in her mind, the darkness swirling around her. Maya clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. The force around her was unbearable, and for a moment, she thought she might break. But then, something shifted. In the corner of her vision, she saw it, the figure. It was standing in the doorway of the shrine, its form flickering in and out of existence like a mirage. It was tall, impossibly tall, and its presence filled the space with a cold, suffocating energy. Its eyes, if they could be called eyes, were endless voids, drawing in everything around them. Maya's breath caught in her throat as the figure stepped forward, the darkness surrounding it swirling like smoke. It reached out, its hand extending toward her, and in that moment, she knew there was no escape. The Forsaken One was awake, and it was coming for her. Episode 4, The Gathering Dark. The forest had fallen silent again. Maya stood frozen in the clearing, the ancient shrine looming before her. its symbols glowing faintly under the oppressive weight of the darkness that surrounded her. The figure, the Forsaken One, had stepped into the shrine, its form flickering between the shadows like a half-formed nightmare. Its presence was overwhelming, suffocating the air around her. Maya's breath caught in her throat, her mind racing. She had come so far to understand what had happened to her parents, to uncover the truth behind Ashfall's cursed history. But now, standing in the heart of the forest, facing the very force that had haunted her family for generations, Maya realized she was no longer just an observer. She was a part of it now. The curse had called to her, drawn her back, and now she couldn't escape. The wind picked up a low, mournful howl that echoed through the trees. The sky above was a sickly shade of violet, the last remnants of sunlight swallowed by dark clouds. The forest was closing in on her, its branches creaking and groaning as though they were alive, reaching out to claim her. "You are the one who opened the gate." The voice came again, but this time, it wasn't just a whisper in her mind. It was real, coming from behind her, its cold, rasping tone curling around her like a tightening noose. Maya spun around, her heart pounding, but the clearing was empty. Nothing. The silence was unnerving. And then, the ground beneath her feet trembled, slightly at first, like the faint rumble of an earthquake. The earth groaned, and the stones of the shrine shook as if something deep below the surface was stirring. She stepped back, instinctively, but then caught herself. This was it. This was the moment. She had been brought here to face the truth, to confront the darkness that had plagued Ashfall for so long. Her parents' disappearance, the echoes in her mind, the book in her hands. It had all led her to this place, to this confrontation. But what could she do? She wasn't equipped to fight whatever this was. She was a daughter of Ashfall, bound to its blood-soaked history. But she wasn't a sorceress, a seer, or someone with the power to banish a being as old as the Forsaken One. She had no idea how to stop it. The trees around her began to shudder. The air turned colder, like the very breath of the land had turned to ice. Maya's fingers tightened around the book she had carried with her since her return. The pages were yellowed, brittle with age, but the power contained within them was undeniable. Her parents had written these words, had lived through this curse, and had sealed something inside this book. If they had found a way to contain the darkness, it was here. And yet, there was still no answer. Nothing to explain what she needed to do. She couldn't leave. The figure was still out there, waiting for her, and the forest was beginning to swallow her whole. Maya, the voice was closer now. It was no longer a whisper. It was a roar, a storm crashing against her mind. The darkness around her seemed to swell with malevolent energy, its presence pressing in from every direction. The earth beneath her cracked open, and from the fissure, a figure rose, a twisted, formless shape that shifted and morphed, barely recognizable. It was not human. It was something older, something far darker, and it was coming for her. The figure lurched toward her, its form flickering like smoke, its eyes, if they could be called eyes, endless, black voids. It reached for her, and its hand passed through the air, brushing the edges of her vision like a nightmare that wouldn't let go. Maya gasped, taking a step back. She had no choice. She had to fight back. But how? She looked around in desperation, her eyes darting to the altar, the stones, the symbols etched into them. Her parents' journals had hinted at a ritual, one that might close the rift, banish the Forsaken One, and protect Ashfall. But she had no idea how to perform it. The book didn't contain instructions, only cryptic phrases and warnings about the cost. A low, guttural growl rumbled from the figure, and Maya snapped her gaze back to it. She couldn't fight it. She didn't have the power. The only thing she could do was stop it from coming any closer. The book. There had to be a way to use the book. She had to unlock whatever hidden power her parents had left behind. The key to stopping Forsaken One. Her fingers flew over the pages, scanning desperately for a solution. And then, there it was, a faint, glowing symbol. It was the same symbol she had seen etched into the stones of the shrine. Her heart skipped a beat as she recognized it. It was a seal, a binding spell, a last attempt to imprison Forsaken One forever. Without thinking, she stood and stepped toward the shrine, her feet moving faster than her mind could keep up. She didn't have time to question whether she was making the right choice. She had to act now. The darkness was closing in. As she placed the book on the altar, the stones around her began to glow, their symbols lighting up one by one. A strange hum filled the air, and Maya felt the power surge around her, filling her with a dizzying sense of vertigo. It was working. The ritual was coming to life, but the Forsaken One wasn't going to let her finish. The figure lunged, its shadowy form swarming toward her, but Maya gritted her teeth and reached out, her fingers touching the glowing symbols on the book. "I bind you." The words escaped her lips like a prayer, and the air around her trembled. The ground shook beneath her feet, and the figure screeched, a horrible, deafening noise that rattled her bones. "I bind you," Maya repeated, louder this time. "I seal you away." The symbol flared to life, and for a moment, everything went black. Episode 5, The Price of Power. The darkness that surrounded Ashfall seemed to deepen as Maya's heartbeat quickened, the tension in the air thick with impending danger. She had succeeded. Partly, the Forsaken One had been pushed back into the rift, trapped momentarily by the ritual her parents had left behind. But Maya could feel it. The shadow wasn't gone. Not yet. It was lingering, waiting, and she knew it wouldn't be long before it tried to break free again. The cold wind howled to the trees of the forest as Maya stood by the altar, the book still glowing faintly in her hands. She stared at the symbols etched into the stone, feeling the weight of their ancient power, the power that had kept the Forsaken One sealed away for generations. But now that the rift had been opened, she understood something far worse. This power wasn't just a tool, it was a chain, and it had to be controlled. The price for using it wasn't something she had fully grasped, but she felt the warning in her bones. Her hands trembled as she closed the book. The symbols faded, leaving behind only a faint trace of light. The forest around her had returned to its eerie stillness, but Maya felt as though she were standing on the edge of a precipice. The wind no longer carried the whispers of the Forsaken One, but something else, something darker, had taken its place. She could hear it now, the sound of something moving in the distance, low and growling, like the rumbling of thunder just before a storm. But there was no storm, no clouds in the sky. The air was thick, heavy with the weight of something that had been released, something that Maya couldn't control. "Maya," the voice was soft, barely a whisper, but she could feel it deep inside her head, its power wrapping around her mind like a vice. It wasn't the Forsaken One. It wasn't the shadows. It was something more. It was as though the very land itself was speaking to her, urging her to listen, to understand. She turned toward the sound, but the forest was empty. There were no figures, no shapes moving among the trees. Only the distant, echoing growl of something larger than she had ever known. Her breath hitched. It wasn't just the Forsaken One. It was something ancient, something bound to the land itself. The rift had been opened, but something else had been awakened. Maya had only seen glimpses of it, hidden in the dark recesses of her parents' journals, in the symbols carved into the forest floor. But now it was real, and it was waiting for her. The price. The voice echoed in her mind, becoming clearer, stronger with every passing second. Maya pressed her hand to her forehead, trying to block it out, but the words wouldn't stop. The price. She had unlocked something that was never meant to be released, and now she had to face the consequences. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet trembled, a deep vibration running through the earth. The trees creaked and groaned, their trunks bending as though they were alive. The forest around her seemed to shift, to bend toward something. Toward her. A figure stepped forward from the shadows. Maya's pulse quickened. This was no shadowy figure, no fleeting glimpse of the Forsaken One. This was something else entirely. The figure was tall, impossibly tall, and its form seemed to shimmer, to flicker, as though it couldn't fully decide what it was. One moment, it was a man, a towering figure dressed in tattered robes, its face hidden beneath a hood. The next, it was a shadow, an absence of light, its form flickering like a candle's flame in the wind. It moved toward her with a deliberate pace, its footsteps sending tremors to the ground beneath her. "You've made a terrible mistake, Maya." The voice was not a whisper now. It was clear, commanding, and deeply resonant. a voice that spoke directly into her soul. Maya's breath caught. She tried to step back, but the figure was already upon her, towering over her like an overwhelming presence. It reached out with a long, bony hand, and for a moment, Maya thought she could feel the weight of its power on her chest, crushing her. "The price of the power you've invoked is more than you know," the figure said, its voice both soothing and terrifying. It leaned closer, its eyes, if they could be called eyes, glowing a faint red, like burning embers. "You cannot stop what has already been set into motion. The rift is open, and now the Forsaken One will return, and so will the price for your meddling." Maya could hardly breathe. The figure was right. The rift hadn't just opened a door to the past. It had torn through the very fabric of reality, and now the land itself was suffering the consequences. But what could she do? She had tried to seal it. She had tried to stop it. You're a part of it, aren't you?" Maya choked out, her voice trembling. The figure tilted its head, a slow, deliberate movement. "I am of this land, as you are. I am the keeper of the old, the watcher of the price. And you, Maya, are the one who must pay it." Suddenly, the air around her shifted, thick with the power of the land, as if something invisible was pressing against her from all sides. The figure's hand shot out, gripping her wrist with force that made her gasp. A cold, unbearable sensation filled her body, and Maya realized it was draining her. Her vision blurred. She felt lightheaded, as if her very soul was being ripped from her body. The figure's grip tightened, and she cried out, trying to pull away. But it was no use. The figure's strength was overwhelming, and its power was like a living thing, feeding on her energy. And then it spoke again. "The price of power is always sacrifice." Episode 6, Awakening the Dark. The air in Ashfall felt thicker than it ever had before, as though the very weight of the town was pressing down on Maya's chest. It was early morning, yet the fog that clung to the streets hadn't lifted, casting a pall over the town that seemed to signal something terrible was about to happen. The wind was cold, sharp, and unnaturally still. Maya had felt it last night, the awakening of something ancient, something dark that had been waiting beneath the surface. The figure in the forest, the voice in her mind, and the power that surged through her when she performed the ritual had all led to this moment. She had unlocked something that could not be undone. Now, as she stood at the edge of town, her gaze fixated on the horizon, she knew it was only a matter of time before the rift fully tore open. The Forsaken One was no longer bound, and with every passing second, the town's grip on reality weakened, slipping like sand through her fingers. Ashfall was no longer the sleepy, forgotten place it had once been. It had become the epicenter of something far worse. She turned and looked back toward her parents' house, the place where it had all started. The shadows that clung to the house seemed darker now, heavier, as though they were waiting for her to come back inside. There was something lurking there, something calling her. The whispers had started again. "Maya, come to us." The voice was no longer distant. It was right there, in the air around her, wrapping around her like an invisible chain. Her mind was filled with images, visions of darkness, of a monstrous figure rising from the earth, of Ashfall drowning in shadows. Her heart raced as she stumbled backward, feeling her knees weaken beneath her. She couldn't afford to succumb to the panic. She needed answers. She turned and walked toward the woods again. The forest felt different today. The air was still, but the trees seemed to move. Their branches creaked and groaned in ways they shouldn't, shifting in patterns that Maya couldn't understand. The forest itself seemed to be alive, aware of her presence. The ground beneath her feet felt soft, almost as though it was sinking. With each step, the distance between her and the rest of Ashfall grew. She was stepping further into the heart of the darkness. She could feel it closing in on her, and with each passing second, she could sense the power that lay beneath the earth, beneath the very foundations of this place. The Forsaken One had been bound here once, and now the chains that had held it were weakening. Maya's breath hitched in her throat as she reached the clearing again, the place where the shrine had stood. The altar was gone, the stone surface now a pile of broken fragments, but the symbols were still there, etched into the earth, glowing faintly as though they had never been disturbed. Their In the center of the clearing, something was stirring. The air seemed to warp and distort around her as the ground rumbled, a deep vibration running through the earth. Maya's chest tightened as she dropped to her knees, her hands pressing against the cold soil. The power beneath the earth was waking, rising like a storm. She could feel it pulling at her, clawing at her mind. It wanted to consume her. Maya, her name was spoken in a low, raspy voice, but this time it wasn't just in her head. It came from behind her, from the shadows that hung like a shroud over clearing. Maya whipped around, her heart thundering in her chest, and there, standing in the shadows, was the figure, the one that had haunted her dreams, the one that had been pulling at the edges of her mind. The figure was tall, impossibly so, its form wrapped in robes that seemed to ripple and distort like smoke. Its face was hidden beneath a dark hood. But Maya could feel its eyes that were not eyes at all, but endless pits that seemed to suck in the very light around it. "You," Maya's voice trembled as she rose to her feet, her body shaking with the weight of what she was about to confront. "You are the Forsaken One." The figure did not move. It didn't need to. Maya could feel its presence all around her, the darkness pressing in from every angle. "Yes." The voice echoed to the clearing, wrapping around Maya like chains, pulling her in closer. "I am the one who was sealed away. I am the one who has been waiting. And now it is time for you to take your place." Maya's breath quickened. I didn't mean to. I just wanted to understand." "But you do not understand," the figure rasped, stepping forward, its form flickering like the edges of a nightmare. "You opened the door, and now the rift will consume this world and everything in it. You cannot undo what has been done. You are the key, and you will pay the price." Maya's knees buckled as she took a step back. She was overwhelmed, the weight of the situation crushing her. But she couldn't stop. She couldn't back down now. She had started this. She had come this far, and she would not let it destroy everything. "No," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I won't let you have it. I won't let you take Ashfall." The figure tilted its head, as if studying her, its black eyes piercing into her soul. "You cannot stop it. The power has already begun to grow. The veil between worlds is torn. All that is left is for you to face the price of awakening the dark." Maya's hands clenched into fists as a surge of determination rose in her chest. She wasn't just going to let this happen. She wouldn't let it consume Ashfall. She would find a way to stop it. But the figure was right. The ritual had awakened something, and she had no idea how to stop it. "You will face me now, Maya, and you'll see the truth." Without warning, the figure reached out with its long skeletal hand, and the earth beneath Maya's feet cracked open. The ground trembled violently, and Maya was thrown backward, landing hard on the cold soil. Pain shot through her, but she didn't have time to focus on it. The rift was opening wider, and the world around her was unraveling. Her vision blurred, and she saw flashes. Images of Ashfall, images of the people she loved, twisted and distorted, consumed by shadows. The darkness was spreading, and it was swallowing everything. She had to do something. And then she remembered the amulet, the one her mother had given her. In a daze, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the amulet. It felt warm in her hand, the faint glow from within pulsing like a heartbeat. She clutched it tightly, and for the first time since returning to Ashfall, she felt a sense of power, real power, surge through her veins. The figure seemed to sense the change, and it paused, its gaze fixed on the amulet in her hand. "You think that trinket will save you?" It rasped, its voice full of mockery. But Maya's hand tightened around the amulet. She didn't know how, but she knew it could help her. She focused on it, on the energy that flowed through her, and the amulet began to glow brighter, the power within it expanding. "You cannot undo what has been set in motion," the figure hissed, its form distorting as the ground around it trembled. But Maya stood tall, summoning every ounce of strength within her. This was her fight now. The Forsaken One wasn't just a monster. It was a part of her past, a part of her family's curse. And she was going to put an end to it. "I can undo this," Maya said, her voice steady. "I can stop you." Episode 7, The Binding. Maya could feel the weight of her choices pressing down on her with every step she took through the woods. The echoes of the Forsaken One, the whispers that plague her thoughts, were growing louder. The forest around her had taken on a menacing quality, as if the very trees were closing in, the branches twisting in ways that made the air feel suffocating. Each step she took felt heavier than the last, her body growing more and more fatigued, though she couldn't tell if it was a physical exhaustion or the weight of her actions that wore her down. She had unlocked the door between worlds. She had unleashed something ancient, something dangerous, and now there was no going back. The rift was still open, and the darkness was spreading. Her family's ancient ritual had been broken. The Forsaken One had returned, and the cost of it all was becoming clearer with every passing second. Maya had no idea what would happen next, but she knew one thing for certain. Ashfall was at the brink of destruction, and it was up to her to stop it. Her mind flashed to the amulet, her mother's amulet, that now hung around her neck, glowing faintly in the dim light of the forest. She had to use it, but she didn't know how. The rituals in her parents' journals were incomplete. The steps weren't clear, and she had no idea how to wield the power that surged within her, or what price she would have to pay to bind the darkness. I can't do this alone, she thought, clenching her fist around the amulet. I have to find a way to stop this, to close the rift. She was not alone, though she could feel it. The shadow, the presence that had been with her from the moment she stepped foot in Ashfall. It was watching her, waiting for her to fail. The ground beneath her feet suddenly trembled, and Maya stumbled, her balance faltering. Her heart skipped a beat. The air around her thickened with a sense of impending doom. She looked around, her breath catching in her throat. She wasn't alone in the woods anymore. Something or someone was with her, and it wasn't human. The figure emerged in the shadows, stepping from the blackness like a predator out of the depths of a nightmare. It was tall, impossibly so, its outline flickering like the last embers of a fire. But as it moved closer, Maya could see more details. A cloaked figure, its face hidden beneath a hood, but its presence undeniable. The darkness around it seemed to bend and writhe, as if the forest itself was reacting to the figure's approach. Maya's stomach twisted. Not again, she thought. She had already faced the Forsaken One's influence, felt its pull, and she wasn't ready to face it fully now. But she had no choice. She had opened the rift. And now, whatever was coming was inevitable. The figure's movements were slow, but deliberate. It did not hurry. It did not need to. It was in control. You've come far, Maya. Its voice wasn't a whisper this time. It was clear, resonant, and full of dark power. The figure's voice was not just heard, but felt, vibrating through the air around her, like a distant thunderstorm that promised destruction. You've unleashed something that cannot be undone, and now you must face the consequences. Maya steadied herself, her heart racing. She took a step back, but her legs felt heavy, as if the forest itself was trying to keep her rooted to the spot. The figure loomed closer, its presence suffocating her. I didn't mean to, Maya said, her voice barely a whisper. I wanted to understand. The figure tilted its head, its gaze seemingly piercing into her very soul. Understanding comes at a price, Maya. You were never meant to know the truth. But now that you do, you are bound to it, just as you are bound to the curse of this town. Maya felt a cold chill settle over her heart. The price. It was always the price. What do you want from me? Maya demanded, though her voice shook. What is it you want me to do? The figure stepped closer, and Maya could feel her breath catch in her throat. The shadows around the figure seemed to grow, pulling the light from the clearing, swallowing it whole. I want you to finish what you started, the figure said, its voice dripping with an unsettling calmness. The rift is open, and there is only one way to close it. Maya swallowed hard, her pulse quickening. What do I have to do? She felt the weight of her own question, knowing she might not like the answer. The figure paused, a dark, unnatural smile curling beneath its hood. The power you unleashed is too great. The darkness cannot be contained by mere words. It can only be bound by blood. Maya's stomach lurched. No. Yes. The figure's smile grew wider. Your blood, the blood of the one who opened the rift, must be used to close it. You must offer yourself, Maya. Only then can the rift be sealed. Maya's knees nearly buckled. She had been warned. She had read the journals. But this was more than she could ever have imagined. She was being asked to sacrifice herself, not just her safety or her sanity, but her very existence. And for what? To save Ashfall? To stop the rift from tearing the world apart? But could she do it? Could she give up everything for this cursed town? You're asking me to die. Her voice cracked, barely audible. The figure's voice lowered, like a whisper that sent shivers down her spine. Not death, Maya. A binding. A sacrifice, yes, but not death. The darkness will be sealed, and the rift will close. But in doing so, your connection to this world will be severed. You will be part of the land itself, bound to it forever. Maya's head spun. The sacrifice was not death, but something worse. It was a complete separation, a severance from everything she had known, everything she had ever loved. The realization hit her like a slap to the face. She was being asked to become a part of the land, a prisoner in the place that had haunted her for so long. "Is there another way?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The figure's answer was simple, yet it carried a weight that crushed her hope. No. Episode 8. Awakening the Darkness. The silence that had fallen over Ashfall was unsettling, like the town was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The dark clouds had gathered once more, and the air was thick with tension, electric with the promise of something sinister. Maya stood at the edge of the forest, the amulet hanging heavily around her neck, its faint glow the only light in the oppressive darkness. She could feel it. The rift, pulsing beneath the earth, a slow, steady beat that was growing louder with every passing second. She had done what she could. She had performed the ritual, tried to seal the darkness, to bind the rift and close it for good. But she had failed. The Forsaken One had not been banished. It had only been temporarily pushed back, like a caged beast waiting for the right moment to strike. And now, that moment was upon her. Maya's thoughts swirled in a haze of fear and confusion. Her mind flashed back to the figure, the dark being that had taunted her in the clearing. It had told her the truth. She was the key to this curse. She had unlocked the rift, opened the door between worlds, and now there was no way to close it without paying the price. She had tried to ignore it, to push it aside, but the truth was undeniable. Maya had already paid part of the price. The cost of knowledge, of power, was too great, and the town of Ashfall was already feeling the effects. People had started to vanish again. The air around the town had grown thick with an unnatural fog, and strange happenings, disappearances, whispers in the night, shadowy figures lurking in the corners of her vision, were becoming more frequent. The town had become a battlefield between the forces of light and darkness, and Maya was trapped in the center of it all. She couldn't turn back now. The Forsaken One was awakening. The rift was open, and the darkness had already begun to spread. Maya turned and began to walk toward the heart of the forest, her footsteps heavy, deliberate. The trees seemed to close in around her, their twisted branches blocking out the faint light from the sky above. The air was cold, and with each step, it grew colder still. The whispers in the wind were unmistakable now. They called her name, taunting her with promises of the power she could never control. But Maya had no choice. She had confronted. The darkness was here, and it was coming for everything she had ever loved. Ahead of her, the clearing appeared again, the site of the shrine, the place where she had first encountered the rift. The symbols on the ground were still faintly glowing, their eerie light flickering like dying embers. Maya approached the altar, her heart pounding in her chest. The stone was cracked now, but the markings on it were still visible, still alive with the dark power that had been released. "It's not over yet," she thought, her hands shaking as she placed the amulet on the altar. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet trembled. A deep, bone-rattling hum filled the air, vibrating through the trees and shaking the very earth beneath her. The rift, the heart of the curse, was pulsing, its power radiating outward, threatening to consume everything. Maya's breath caught in her throat as the ground split open before her, the rift widening like a gaping wound in the earth. The shadows seemed to spill out, pouring from the dark void, coiling around the trees like tendrils of black smoke. She could feel it. The darkness was rising. And then she heard it, a low, guttural growl, like the sound of an ancient creature awakening from a long, terrible sleep. The sound came from within the rift itself, vibrating through the very air around her. Maya took a step back, her heart racing, but she couldn't look away. The Forsaken One was emerging. The shadow that had once been bound was now free, and it was coming for her. Maya, the voice came again, not in her mind this time, but from the rift, clear and full of power. You cannot stop me. You cannot undo what has been set into motion. The ground beneath her cracked wider, and from the blackness emerged a form, shifting and flickering like smoke. The air grew colder, the temperature plummeting as the figure took shape. It was tall, impossibly tall, its form wrapped in darkness, but its eyes, they were the only part of it that seemed to burn with an eerie light. Endless, hollow eyes that seemed to stare right through her. You have opened the door, Maya. The voice continued, its tone cold and filled with dark amusement. And now you will pay the price. Maya's knees nearly buckled beneath her. This was it, the moment she had feared. The Forsaken One had returned, and now there was no escaping it. She was the key. She had opened the door, and now the darkness was free to consume everything. But there was still a chance. She could close it. She had to close it. The amulet, the power within it. It was her only hope. The figure stepped forward, its form flickering and shifting like a mirage. Maya raised her hand to the amulet, her fingers trembling. She had to focus. She had to find the strength to stop the curse, to bind the darkness once more. But the figure was already reaching for her, its hand extending from the rift like a shadow, its fingers curling toward her chest. She could feel its coldness, its presence seeping into her skin, filling her with a paralyzing fear. Maya, the voice whispered in her ear, there is no escaping this. You are mine now. You are bound to the darkness, and there is nothing you can do to break free. Maya's vision blurred, her head spinning. She could feel herself slipping, losing control, but she couldn't let go. Not yet, not while there was still a chance to stop it. Her fingers tightened around the amulet, and with everything she had left, she cried out the words her parents had once spoken, the words that would bind the rift. By the power of the bloodline, I bind you, Maya shouted, her voice shaking with the force of the incantation. By the light of the ancient bond, I seal you away. The rift trembled violently, and the figure shrieked, a horrible, high-pitched wail that seemed to tear at the very fabric of reality. The ground shook beneath her, and the shadows that had poured from the rift began to retreat, like a tide pulling back into the ocean. Maya stumbled back as the amulet glowed brighter, its light searing through the darkness. She could feel the power coursing through her veins, filling her with a strength she hadn't known she possessed. The rift was closing. She was closing it. But the cost of this ritual was far greater than she had imagined. Episode 9, Sacrifice. The night had fallen quickly over Ashfall, and with it came the suffocating silence that always accompanied a storm. The air felt charged with an unnatural energy, the tension thick enough to cut through. Maya stood in the heart of the woods once more, the amulet still glowing faintly around her neck. Her hands trembled, but she steadied herself, forcing her breath to come evenly as she looked up at the place where the rift had once torn open the world. The air shimmered, but this time the shadows didn't crawl from the earth. There was no crack in the ground, no ominous figure emerging from the blackness. Instead, the wood seemed to breathe with an oppressive stillness, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for something. For her, she had done everything she could. She had sealed the rift. She had bound Forsaken One back into the shadows, where it belonged. But deep within her, she knew, she could feel it. The curse wasn't over. The darkness hadn't been defeated. It had only been pushed back, and it was waiting. A rustling in the underbrush snapped her out of her thoughts, and her heart skipped in her chest. She had been expecting it. The figure had been watching her, waiting for her to come to this point. The sacrifice. She had been warned, hadn't she? Told over and over again that this wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a reckoning. The whispers in her mind began to rise again, calling her name, whispering of the price of the debt she had yet to pay. Maya's time. Her blood ran cold as the figure stepped from the shadows. It wasn't the Forsaken One itself. Not yet. But it was the same presence, the same dark energy that followed her since the moment she crossed the threshold into this cursed town. The figure was cloaked in darkness, but Maya knew that it was not just a shadow. It was something far older, something tied to the land itself. The very thing that had been waiting for her to fail. Maya. The figure spoke in a voice that vibrated through the very air. You have done your part. You have opened the rift. You have sealed it. And now, the figure stepped closer, its form becoming clearer. The blackness that surrounded it began to dissipate, and Maya saw what it truly was, an ancient, twisted being, tall and skeletal, its skin pale and stretched tight over its bones, like a relic of something long forgotten. Now you will pay the price, the figure hissed, the price of your meddling with forces far beyond your control. You thought you could bind the darkness, but darkness is not so easily contained, Maya. It's alive, it grows, and now it demands its due. Maya felt a surge of anger rise within her. She had fought so hard, so desperately, to protect Ashfall, to stop this darkness from consuming everything she loved. But this thing before her, this creature of shadow and malevolence, was telling her it was all for nothing. No, Maya said, her voice trembling but steady. I won't let you have it. I won't let you take Ashfall. Not after everything we've been through. The figure's hollow eyes glowed faintly as it laughed, an eerie, rasping sound that seemed to come from deep within its chest. You don't understand, Maya, it said softly. The darkness is not something you can fight. It is the price of the world, the price of existence itself. It must be paid, and now you must decide. The figure moved closer, its skeletal fingers brushing against her arm. The rift is sealed, but the land is not free. You are the key, Maya. You are the one who opened it. You are the one who must seal it for good. Maya shook her head, retreating a step, but her legs felt like lead, weighed down by the figure's presence, by the looming choice she knew she had to face. What do you want from me? Maya demanded, her voice barely above a whisper. She had to know. She had to understand. Because if she couldn't comprehend what was happening, then she might be lost forever. The figure tilted its head, its empty eyes gleaming in the darkness. It's simple, it said, its voice as cold as a grave. You must give yourself. You must offer yourself as the final sacrifice to bind the darkness for good. Maya's breath caught in her throat. The words felt like a punch to her gut. The price wasn't a choice, it was a demand. The price was her. Her life. Her very existence. No, I won't do it, she said, though her voice wavered. I won't give myself to you. The figure's laughter echoed through the trees, and the forest itself seemed to bend under the force of it. You misunderstand, it said. It is not a choice, Maya. It is a requirement. The darkness is too great to be contained without a binding of equal weight. Only by offering your soul, your very essence, can you close the rift completely. Only by becoming one with the darkness can you stop it from destroying everything you love. Maya stumbled backward, her mind reeling. The sacrifice was not a metaphor. It was real. If she truly wanted to stop the darkness, to protect Ashfall and the world, she had to give up everything. But there had to be another way. There had to be. She couldn't let herself be consumed by the very darkness she'd fought against. She had to find another solution. The figure advanced, its hand outstretched toward her, its cold fingers grazing her arm. There is no escape, Maya. This is a final binding. The price is steep, and now it must be paid. Episode 10, The Final Echo. The wind howled to the darkened trees, a sound so haunting and unnatural that it seemed as though the forest itself was alive. Maya's breath came in ragged gasps, her heart hammering in her chest as she stood before the rift, the ground trembling beneath her feet. The figure, the darkness itself, loomed before her, its cold, hollow eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that froze her blood. She had come so far. She had faced the shadows, heard the whispers, felt the pull of the darkness in her soul. And now, at the edge of the world, she was asked to make a choice that would determine everything. The Forsaken One had emerged from the rift. It had filled Ashfall with its presence, and now it stood before her, its form flickering like a ghost in the wind. She had bound it once, but now the rift was wide open, and there was no stopping the darkness from spilling into the world. And the figure had offered her the final price. Her life. Maya took a deep breath, her fingers trembling around the amulet. Her mother's amulet, the one that had guided her, that had been the only link to her family and to the past. The one thing she had left. She could feel its warmth in her hand, a flicker of light in the overwhelming darkness. But it was not enough. The choice before her was impossible. Maya, the figure hissed, its voice cutting through the stillness. You fought so hard, but in the end, you can't escape what you've awakened. The rift must be closed. The darkness must be bound. Maya's mind raced. She had come here to stop this, to protect the town, to save the world. But now, the figure was right. She had unlocked the door. She had opened the rift. And now, there was no going back. But I can still try, she thought fiercely. I can still fight. I won't give up. The figure stepped forward, its form flickering like smoke. The air grew colder with each movement, and Maya could feel the power of the darkness pressing down on her, its weight suffocating her. It was everywhere in the trees, in the air, in her thoughts. It had already taken so much from her. You don't have to do this, Maya said, her voice hoarse with fear. There has to be another way. There has to be another way to stop it. I don't want to die. I don't want to give myself to you. The figure's laugh was low and chilling, a sound that seemed to reverberate through the very air around her. You misunderstand, it said. You're not giving yourself to me. You're giving yourself to the land, to the darkness that is bound to it. And in doing so, you will save the world from what you've unleashed. Your blood will seal the rift, your soul will bind the darkness, and Ashfall will be free. The figure's voice was soft, almost coaxing now, as if it were offering her a gift. But Maya knew better. This was no gift. This was a curse. She took a step back, her hand shaking as she gripped the amulet tighter. I won't let you win, she whispered to herself. I won't let this happen. But even as she said it, she could feel the pull of the rift. It was calling to her, its dark energy seeping into her skin, into her soul. The land was hungry, and it was waiting for her to pay the price. The figure tilted its head, sensing her hesitation. You know what must be done, Maya. It is the only way. Your sacrifice will close the rift for good, and the darkness will never return. You are the final key. You are the one who can stop this. Maya's heart ached with the weight of the decision. She had tried to fight it, tried to find another way, but every step she took, every attempt she made, led her back to this moment. The darkness was unstoppable. The rift was too strong, and she was the only one who could close it. But was she willing to pay the price? Was she ready to give up everything? Her family, her future, her very soul. No, she said, her voice steadying. I can't. I won't let you take me. There has to be another way. For a moment, there was silence. The figure stood still, as if it were considering her words. The wind howled around them, but there was no other sound, no other movement. It was like time itself had frozen in the face of her defiance. And then, the figure's voice came again, softer, almost regretful. You don't understand, Maya. There is no other way. Maya's breath caught in her throat as the figure reached out with its long, skeletal hand, the shadows wrapping around her like chains. The power of the rift surged, pulling her closer, drawing her toward it. The figure's hand hovered just in front of her face, its fingers inches from her skin. You have no choice now, the figure whispered, its voice dark and final. Maya's heart pounded in her chest as she stepped back, the darkness pressing in all around her. She couldn't fight it anymore. It was too much. But then, something within her snapped. The amulet. It was glowing brighter now, pulsing with an energy that filled her body with warmth. It was as if the very essence of her mother's spirit was calling out to her, urging her to make one last stand. She could feel the power within her, the power of the land, the power of her bloodline. No, Maya said again, louder this time. I won't give in to you. With a sudden, desperate motion, Maya raised the amulet high above her head, feeling the surge of power course through her veins. The ground trembled beneath her feet as the energy from the amulet spread outward, engulfing the rift in a brilliant light. The figure recoiled, its form flickering as though it were being torn apart by the force. "This ends now," Maya whispered, her voice filled with determination. Episode 11, the final echo. The world had gone quiet. Maya stood at the heart of the forest, the rift before her still open but weakening. Her hands, still trembling from the force of her power, hung at her sides. The light from the amulet, her mother's amulet, was dimming now, its glow fading, as though the very essence of her family's legacy was exhausted. The figure, the Forsaken One, had retreated. Its dark form flickered like a fading shadow, as if it were fighting against an invisible force that was keeping it at bay. But Maya knew that its presence was not gone, not entirely. It was still here, still waiting for its chance to break free. She had done what she could. She had fought with every ounce of strength in her. The rift was closing. The darkness was retreating. But the price was still unclear. Maya looked at her hands. They were still stained metaphorically and literally with the weight of her choices. She had opened the rift. She had sealed it. But what had it cost her? What had she lost in the process? And was it enough? Maya... The voice came again, though not as it had before. It was faint, distant, and yet it felt like a pressure inside her mind, pulling at her consciousness. You could not run from it. The figure, the voice, was always there, always whispering from the corners of her thoughts, the remnants of the darkness she had tried to defeat. Maya closed her eyes, willing herself to stay calm, to think clearly. "No," she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible. "No more. I won't let you win." The rift before her was narrowing, the edges becoming jagged, as if the fabric of the world were trying to stitch itself back together. But the rift was not just a portal. It was a scar, a wound on the land itself. And no matter how hard Maya tried, it felt like it might never fully heal. Her mind raced through the last moments, the ritual, the binding. She had called upon the ancient power of her ancestors, using her own blood to seal the rift, to trap the darkness. But in doing so, she had bound herself to it. She had sacrificed everything. And yet, it wasn't over. The amulet, her only remaining link to her parents, began to pulse with energy again, brighter this time, as though reacting to her thoughts. It was pulling her, guiding her toward the very core of the rift. "It's not finished," Maya thought, her breath quickening. The rift wasn't fully sealed. The darkness wasn't entirely contained. She had to finish this. She had to end it, once and for all. Maya walked toward the rift, each step heavier than the last. The ground trembled beneath her feet, the forest groaning in protest. She could feel the darkness swirling around her, trying to draw her in, to pull her under. But Maya was stronger now. She wasn't a frightened girl who had arrived in Ashfall, unsure of her place in this cursed town. She was something more now, something forged in fire, tested by darkness. With a final, determined step, Maya placed her hands on the edge of the rift. The world around her seemed to go still. The air was thick with energy, and for a moment, she could see it. The endless expanse of shadow, the void beyond the rift, the place where the Forsaken One had come from. It was endless, dark, cold, and it was calling her, pulling at her, trying to make her part of it. But she was done running. Her hands tightened around the amulet, the final link to her family, to her past, to everything she had fought for. And as she closed her eyes, she felt a surge of power, an overwhelming tide of energy that swept through her, filling her with light, with love, with every memory she held dear. "I bind you once and for all," she whispered, her voice strong now, her words carrying the weight of her ancestors' sacrifice. The amulet flared to life, its light brighter than ever before, enveloping her in its warmth. The rift trembled as the power surged through the land, binding it, sealing it once and for all. The darkness screeched in fury, but it was too late. With a final, triumphant breath, Maya felt the rift close, felt the last of the Forsaken One's power fade into nothingness. The aftermath. The world around Maya went silent. The air, thick with tension, began to settle, the unnatural fog lifting from Ashfall. The trees around her stopped groaning, the earth beneath her feet no longer trembling. For a moment, she stood there, her heart racing. Her hands still glowed with the power of the amulet. Her mind was a blur of thoughts, of the sacrifice, of the darkness, of the land that had been saved. She had done it. The rift was closed. The Forsaken One was gone. Ashfall was free. But was she? Maya's legs gave way, and she fell to her knees, exhaustion washing over her like a tidal wave. The light from the amulet began to fade, the glow weakening until it was nothing more than a faint shimmer in her palm. For a long moment, Maya sat there, breathing deeply, as if waking from a long and terrible dream. Her body ached, her mind felt numb, but slowly, the weight of it all began to lift. The darkness that had consumed her thoughts, that had plagued her every step, was finally gone. But then, something began to stir within her, a presence, familiar and comforting. She looked up, and there, standing at the edge of the clearing, was a figure she knew all too well. Her mother, Maya. Her mother's voice was soft, full of warmth, of love. "You did it!" Tears welled up in Maya's eyes as she slowly stood. She reached out, her hand trembling, as if afraid that her mother might vanish in an instant. "I couldn't have done it without you," Maya whispered, her voice breaking. Her mother smiled, her eyes soft with pride. "You always had the strength, Maya. We all did. Now the land is at peace. The rift is closed, and the curse is broken." Maya looked around her, at the stillness of the forest, the town of Ashfall that lay just beyond the trees. For the first time, she felt the weight of the land lifting from her shoulders. She had done it. She had saved Ashfall. But there was one more thing she had to do. Maya stepped forward, and as she did, she felt the energy from the amulet flow back into her, the final echo of her journey. She turned back to her mother. "Thank you," she said softly, and in that moment she knew she was free. Ashfall was free. The darkness was gone. And with that, Maya took her first true breath of peace.